First of all, warm welcome. My subject of today is stormy weathers in the European wind power sector. The key question is, how can we keep the pace? And I fully agree with Thomas Grigoleit. What we are now going through in Germany, the Energiewende, the big turnaround in the energy sector. This is some fascinating change, and it is a very positive thing. However, and I will reflect on this, it is not a surprise, that is not easy going. It is a truly big challenge, and we see plenty of challenges which need to be managed. The positive thing is they can be managed, and I will give you some outlook on this. So first of all, from the investor's perspective, renewable energy, no doubt, is a real hotspot for investment. It provides a lot of growth opportunity, and on a global basis, almost $200 billion are going to this sector annually. So it shows it is a real important sector. Another point is indeed, since 2011, we see somewhat decreasing levels of investment going to the sector. And in this renewable energy sector, wind power is probably the most important, contributing to 1/3 of the total investment. For me, it's a little bit of a surprise that the level of financial investors going to the sector is still a little bit limited. Venture capital, private equity, just investing about 8 billion per year in the sector. So it's a surprise that not more financial investors are really interested in this. And now we see that there are new investors coming to the sector who are looking for other profile which are more infrastructure related. Nevertheless, if we are honest, we can say that a lot of this growth is also stimulated by subsidies and the legal framework which was beneficial. So the question is, what will happen and what needs to be done if the subsidization will decrease? And you all know this is a matter of serious discussion right now. The good news, it can be managed. Let's see. So now more specifically, a view on the wind power sector. Wind power has been a very impressive growth story. You see how much cumulative wind power has been adding. Already today we see that between the last 10 years, the share of wind power in the portfolio has been increasing from just 2% to 10%, but the big additional growth has to come. And let's see more specifically what is ahead. And we clearly can say that wind power is the backbone of the German energy turnaround. So there are huge plans, investments ahead in the wind power sector. So 25 gigawatts are planned until 2030. And the investment needed to make that happen is about 120 billion euros, quite sizable number of capital. And if we look a little bit even beyond this, to achieve what Thomas Grigoleit said, the energy turnaround, 80% renewables, we're talking about 50 gigawatts, which are needed, and you can imagine what it means in terms of investment. So the plans are huge. Good ideas, but frankly, some challenges become more clear during implementation, and have a look on this. First of all, we have to acknowledge that there is not just one wind power sector. We need to differentiate a little bit into onshore and offshore. And you see on the bottom line, the equity internal rate of return is very different if you look on onshore and on offshore. But that is only one side of the medal, because the onshore risk profile is a little bit different compared to the offshore profile. Nevertheless, what it means that different type of investors may look on very different type of projects in the wind power sector. Infrastructure related risk-averse funds may look much more on onshore, where others which look for very attractive perspectives might be more attracted by offshore. So, as mentioned, there are a couple of new challenges which are very real and which need to be managed. Let's have a look on this. First of all, we acknowledge that there are technical challenges, severe and serious technical challenges, in particular if we look on offshore projects. The more deep water the projects go, the more difficult it is to handle technically, and there are some experiences which show that economically it can end up in a disaster even. The other thing, and you all have seen this in the papers, now the subsidies are under discussion. Mr. Altmaier, our Minister for Environmental Affairs, just announced that there will be a cap in Germany, and just yesterday there was a message coming from Brussels that more harmonization across the EU is envisaged. So we should expect that subsidization of the level will be more capped, will be more limited. And many of you might have also heard there are other problems which need to be resolved. The grid connection of new wind power installations is a big challenge. They are very capital intensive. There is some time delay. It is a serious problem, and some good solutions need to be found for this as well. And finally, and I will look on this in more detail, there are also some operational aspects associated to this. So a couple of real challenges where the operators and the players in the industry have to cope with. So as said, green energy investments have always been a fancy thing and have been growing a lot, but if you look on the capital markets view, the clean energy stock index had a peak some years ago, and if we look the current situation, it has come down. There is not that much enthusiasm all around. We have seen some experiences in the solar business. So the conclusion is, what need players in the industry do to re-attract the acceptance and the favor of the capital markets? Obviously, the favor in the future cannot be built on there is a nice legal framework, there are subsidies. That is not enough. There needs to be significantly more. Just a more specific view on the wind power sector and the offshore sector, you see that the cost per megawatt hour installing capacity is heavily dependent on the distance from the coast. The more you go offshore, the higher the investment. Of course, usually you do not do this if there's not a reward. And the reward is that the wind intensity is higher, the more you go offshore. At the same time, the risk increases because it's technically much, much more challenging. And this is something, honestly, where the industry stands at the beginning of the learning curve, not at the end. And this is shown here that if we have offshore and onshore wind, in onshore wind we have even achieved a certain level of maturity. And we are talking about repowering, replacing old equipment by new one. And this is a quite stable environment, whereas in offshore we still are very much at the beginning of the learning curve, and there's much improvement really needed. So what needs to be done to make the sector and the investment profitable, and indeed to make investors happy and confident? So the main implications is, first of all, that in some segments of the wind power sector, consolidation could make a lot of sense. And I will come to this point. Still leaving sufficient space for startups and for newcomers, but not everywhere. So another thing is to look on the business model, on the business system. Maybe we should not. We should have more specialists for specific things. And the third thing is operational excellence. And you will see the impact of this is really huge. First of all, let's look on consolidation. we can say that, as an example, the wind turbine sector is not really concentrated. And I would expect that at least in this sector, we will see more concentration, that we will have a couple of very strong global players. And as you know, some of the players are currently suffering and not creating the profits that they like to have. So it is very obvious that something is going to happen there to secure profitability. The next thing is the business model, the business system. And this is strongly associated what a company in this sector is covering in the value chain. So the question is, will there be companies who are covering almost the entire value chain, or will we see more specialists? My hypothesis is we will see a little bit both. There are integrators like RWE who cover different elements of the value chain, but there will be clear specialist developers like P&E, like Windreich, and there will be pure owners like insurances, funds. So more specialization across the value chain, and the thing is there is space for startups, for new ideas to position in this sector as well. And this is now reflecting on the big deviation which we see in profitability in this sector. And I will not reflect so much on CAPEX, on finding the right place with Windfield. You see the big deviation in operational expenses. Such projects can be very low cost, but they can also be very high cost. And if an installation is profitable or not, is really, really strongly dependent how well this all is managed operationally. And the key to do this is indeed maintenance. So the key question is, how much is it possible to reduce the downtime of components? What are the specific costs of repairs? What is the overall strategy to run such operations? This is really key to make such investments profitable. And finally, what is our role in this? Our role is to combine all these aspects, the financial aspects, the portfolio aspects, the investment planning, but also together with the operational things, because we strongly believe an investment can only be successful if the operational strategy is secured. So, in very brief terms, this was my short pitch on wind power. Stormy weathers, but still good perspective, it well managed.